To better your best and your world, you need to dig deep and grow. Join us as top experts, leaders, and creators uncover powerful insights to help you grow in life and in work. And now, your host, Michael McEvoy.
Welcome, everybody. This is Michael McEvoy, and welcome to another edition of Dig Deep Grow, the show dedicated to helping you better your best and your world. We are live, and when you're live, you can have some great things happen, and sometimes problems arise, technical snafus and the like. So be prepared for that. It's what's called a challenge or adversity, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. In life, sometimes you get thrown some pretty heavy curveballs, others times lighters, but there are certain people who have gotten probably the heaviest load that you can get in these circumstances. Why is it that top achievers can sometimes get through these effortlessly, at least seemingly, and others just get crushed by them? So we have somebody who's very qualified to talk about that today. His name is Russ Whitney. Russ has got a pretty storied business. He amassed over $250 million in his real estate and training empire. He's written and trained in over 30 books and training courses. Millions of people trained. So Russ has got a very unique insight about the subject because, as I'm going to explain in a minute, in 2008, his life imploded. And so there were a lot of things that transpired, and I want Russ to share that with you. So, Russ, thanks for joining me.
Michael, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So take me back, Russ. It was 2008, and tell me how life was before this happened for you. What was going on?
Well, probably the best way to do it is in a couple of stages. I had gone through a lot of ups and downs in business from, say, 1984 to 1992. And then I changed in and out of those businesses. And in 1996, I hit on the right formula. And I started a financial training company, which is based around real estate investment, stock investment, asset protection, kind of everything to do with starting and running a business entrepreneurially. And 96, I did $5 million in revenue the first year. The second year, $13 million, $26 million, all the way up to by 2003, I was doing $250 million a year. I went from 12 employees to 2,000 in 7 countries. Took the company public. The stock went from 14 cents to $14. I had 5.5 million shares. So you do the math. It's probably $80 million just alone in unencumbered stock. The company was cash flowing about $1 million a week after all expenses. So that was the rise. I think we'll have to tie it back to the childhood too. Has a lot to do with connecting the dots of our life.
Let me stop you there, and I'll ask you a question. We were going to talk about the crash, but I may as well ask you, as someone who's been on both sides, what would you say your ability to handle the ascent of that business? You just said it all happened like amazingly fast. For most people that could take a lifetime. So tell me about how you handled it in that time.
Well, do you have your audience of entrepreneurs?
Yes,
and business owners and people who are aspiring? Okay.
It's definitely going to be people who are more along those lines.
Okay, because there's a lot of messages in this inner voice. So just for you all listening, I never set out to write a book. We're going to probably talk about my new book. That's why we do these interviews.
That's right.
But I never set out to write a book, so I want to make that clear. I set out on a path after the implosion to save my own life. And how it ended up in a book is a great story for entrepreneurs. But how did I handle the ascension? Well, I'll tell you the most pivotal is most businesses go from entrepreneurial to bureaucracy. So if you think of Apple Computer, great example, started in Steve Jobs' garage, and came a point where they grew to a point where they had to insinuate more skilled management. So you can't run. When you're an entrepreneur, you're the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. When you move to a certain point in revenue and size, you've got to run a business by systems, processes, resources, forecasting, and budgeting. And so, in my case, that happened in 1999. The company hit $60 million. This was like 4 years after we started. And I got to a point where it was over my head. And we'll talk about this because I didn't graduate high school. I didn't go to any college or business courses or any of those types of things. In fact, I had to quit high school in the 11th grade. But I had a decision. The company had about $4 million in the till, and I had a decision. I could either take that $4 million out after working hard and feeling like I earned it, or I had to gamble that on bringing in some high-level executives, like Fortune 500 execs from, say, GE, PepsiCo, Philip Morris. These kind of executives may run a $150 or $200 million business units within a big Fortune 500 company. So they come up through the management ranks. And, not entrepreneurs, we call them entrepreneurs. They know how to run a big business within the confines or structure of an already existing business. You don't find many of them starting their own businesses.
Right. Yeah,
So I bet the money on that, and from that year, at $60 million, we went to $90 million, then to $120 million, $160 million, $190 million, all the way up to $250 million. So it was the best bet I made.
Wow.
So recognizing when you're moving from entrepreneurial to a bigger bureaucracy.
That's a big trap for many people. So you got past that one pretty well. All right, so let's go fast forward to where things began to start to go south.
Okay, so it's probably right around 2005, 2006. We're a publicly traded company, and we came under investigation by the Securities Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice. So that's like the IRS on steroids, and they are the highest level of government regulatory agency you can get. And like an IRS audit, you don't have to have done anything wrong to come under the audit. So they made some efficacy claims, and then it got to a broad-based subpoena. And how to make money a business or industry is kind of gray area for conventional America anyway. And then the rapid growth, the no debt, I think they thought there had to be a rat somewhere, and there wasn't. And so they wanted me to enter into a voluntary compliance order, pay a fine, but I didn't feel like we did anything wrong. And I didn't take the company public to pull a whole bunch of money out of the IPO, which I never did. I was looking to create stock value in a valuable company. And so I refused to settle. And so over the next 4 years, I spent $22 million in legal fees. And that was a big chunk. And at the end of 4 years, there was no finding of any wrongdoing, no sanction, no fine, nothing, zero. They both closed their case and walked away, which never happens with government agencies. They always want you to enter into a compliance so they can justify, the taxpayers' money that they spent on nothing. But the worst part of it is 1,000 people lost their jobs because of all that bad press under this investigation. The stock dropped, sales dropped, and so people lost good people. People who had been there for years and years and years lost their jobs. The stock went from $14 to 14 cents. I lost a good $70 million. And we came under such scrutiny that the board pressured me, almost like Steve Jobs when he was forced out of Apple Computer. Well, I was forced out of my own company, the company I founded. When you're public, it's a different set of rules. And so, I lost a lot of money, but it was also a total humiliation, for me. I was humiliated in my industry.
Yeah.
Being ousted from my own company, humiliated in front of my family and children, and yikes, it was horrible.
Yeah. So
and not only that, I'm a real estate guy. That's where I started real estate investing. And so I had millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate. And right here in Florida in 2006, 2007, like the rest of the country, real estate imploded. Only here it dropped good 80% in value. I mean, we got crushed. So I lost tens of millions. I lost 80% of my net worth. Everything I worked for years and years and years was gone in a flash.
All right. So
at that same time, the most important part is that my marriage of 29 years started to crumble.
Okay.
I thought I'd be married to someone else, and so I was getting hit from all sides.
All right. So let me stop you there. I'm going to ask you.
Sure.
You kind of gave the storyline. What I want to know is where you were at emotionally. Because that's what we want to focus on, is how people can learn to go through adversity and challenges with a serenity, or at least more of a serenity than they might. So describe how you were within at that time.
I was crushed. So, I thought, okay, the real estate market is crumbling. The business is now gone. My marriage is gone. I know. Here's a good idea. Let's try alcohol. And so, that wasn't really my thing, but I can tell you that, now I was probably more workaholic than, alcoholic. But I had a lawyer friend, my doctor, who were real concerned about me because I withdrew. I wasn't making meetings. I had my own jet. I had a Citation 7 jet, so I, hit the jet and started traveling a little bit. And so I was in a crushed place. I think nervous breakdown is a self-diagnosis, but if there is such a thing, I was about as close to it as you could get.
And that
so I didn't handle the first part of it very well at all.
Okay, and that bled over into your personal life as well, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so
let me just mention this, Michael. There's a lot of people might be thinking, oh, well, he had hundreds of millions of dollars in sales of this or that, and how bad could that be? But you know what is $50,000 anger and $5 million anger is the same. Anxiety, frustration, fear, doubt, relationship issues. It's the same stuff, whether one has money or not. There's a lot of people listening who probably got hurt in that 05, 06, 07, 2007 era with foreclosures, economy down, losses of jobs. But I found an answer that allowed me to move this whole thing to serenity.
Okay.
And that's the message really for today.
All right, we're going to get to that in a minute. I'll ask you. I'll make a comment, and that's that. You mentioned 5,000 or 5 million doesn't matter. Well, I would argue that since you lost 1,000 people who were employed under you, that you carried a little more of a load than even a solopreneur would. Am I right?
Yeah, no question about it. That was my family too. I was very, very good friends. A lot of those people started when we were small, and they worked their butts off to build a great, quality, valuable company. And in a moment, boom, gone.
Yeah.
So of course, I carried a lot of that pressure and stress. And for 4 years, while we were under this investigation, when you're being investigated for fraud and this and that and the other thing, people don't think it as allegation; they think you're guilty.
Right.
So I had to walk around with that, finger pointing in restaurant stuff, and people at large wondering. It was a really, really stressful time.
Right. Yeah.
Under that, when you're on an investigation like that, I have 2,000 employees in 7 countries. If one employee shreds a document, that's a felony, and the CEO is guilty then of that felony.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of erroneous things that go along with something like that.
Right. Right. Okay. So you hit rock bottom. You're down in alcohol. Take us from there. Take us from there.
I was kind of up in that. That numbed me out a little bit.
Right. Okay, so take us from there. How did you? What was your journey? How did you get through it?
Well, here's what I did. I told you, I sat down one day and I was just crushed. Listen, I had worked very hard for lots and lots and lots of years. I sacrificed a lot, and I had the Citation 10 jet, Rolls Royce, Ferrari, you name it, and in a moment's flash, that all that was gone. And I just sat down. I was 50 years old and looked up at the air at God and said, God, what is the point? What's the purpose? I felt like probably a lot of people listening, I felt like a hamster on a hamster wheel in a pet store. The hamster runs and runs and runs and he gets nowhere. So we go to work, we get a job, we find our spouse, we buy a car, then we get our house. We have some financial crisis, go backwards again. Every once in a while we have a good family or vacation day and we say life is good, and then back on the hamster wheel. 60 years later, we die. And I was thinking, because I had that luxury to take a step back and not have to get into the grind, this was my chance to take a breath and say, what's the point of this whole thing? Mm-hmm. If that's all there was to it, and there's a God or an organization to the universe, I'm thinking it would have to be a very mean one if life was all just struggle, back, and die. And I didn't think that was true. And so I decided to go on a journey. I took a hiatus. I walked away from all my businesses, put management in the ones that were running, lost millions and millions of dollars. Just got crushed. And I went on a 20-country mission, a tour, I guess you could say, over the next 4 years. I traveled first to Hawaii, then to Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Israel, Haiti, Colombia, Spain, all through Europe. And I got to work, I've got 30 books I've written, three bestsellers. And so that gave me access. So I got to work with some of the top religious, business, spiritual leaders worldwide. And I went to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meetings and one-on-ones and, coachings and every religion you can think of. And my whole point was, what's the purpose and who's right? Mm-hmm. Is the Jews right, or the Christians right, or the Muslims right, the Hindus, the Buddhists, Tao Te Ching, Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Phil, who's right? or are they all saying the same thing in different times, languages, and cultures? And I found some incredible, amazing answers that absolutely changed my life in immeasurable ways. And that's what the Inner Voice book is about.
Okay.
So in the voice, let me tell you this, in the book I talk in two voices. I talk in the voice of a warrior, and I talk in the voice of a statesperson. Now, on my travels, this is what I learned working with some of the highest levels of religious and spiritual leaders. And that is that when we're in the warrior phase of life, okay, we generally operate on human behavior, human training. And that is what mom, dad, brother, sister, preacher, teacher taught us. And those include lots of limiting beliefs, selfishness, self-centeredness, arrogance, finger-pointing, judging, blaming, self-pity, victim, confusion, bewilderment, why me, why me? And we chase a lot of rabbits during those years that we don't catch because we don't understand that there are immutable laws to the universe, and there's an organization to the universe that will work for anybody who takes the time to learn it. And so here's what happens. Those years are usually 20 to 40, as I told you. And then generally what happens, in most cases, not all, but most, sooner or later one will go through a life crushing, like I did, and many of your listeners. And that is either life will crush us in tragedy, sickness, or something. We'll get crushed in a relationship, wife, significant other, husband, or we crush our own selves in self-sabotage. And this is where we finally start to experience mortality. And that is, okay, this journey's going to end. What in the world am I doing here? What's the point? And this is where we start to learn the power of humility, the power of tolerance and patience, the power of kindness and letting go of resentments, and not just defining those. How do we put those to work in our lives? How do we do those things to get benefit of this great power and find our purpose? That's what the whole book's about, is about those two items and how to use those to find your purpose.
Okay, so
what are you here for?
How would you for the high achiever, for the people who are go-getters, in the kind of a traditional sense, they do have a certain MO, right? And from what you've learned, what could you teach them or say to them that might help them give them a different perspective? Because they might be, on that hamster wheel, thinking that they're, on top of the world. Maybe they are, or maybe they're just about to plunge, have their own crash. So what wisdom would you offer them?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I don't blame God or anybody. God doesn't cause things to happen like what happened in my business, or real estate crises, or little boys or girls to get raped, or people to get murdered. People do that. What God does do in an instant like mine, though, where the real estate market imploded, the business imploded, God allows what's called an act of providence. And an act of providence is something that God could prevent but doesn't for the greater good. And you know what? I was at a point where I was burnt out in the business. I think there was a bigger plan for me, which is what I'm doing right now with Inner Voice. It's all about helping and fixing people. And so, number one, you can be going along real good, but I'll give you in the book. Here's the best answer I can give you. Let's talk a little bit about immutable laws of the universe. Okay, mm-hmm. Immutable means irreversible, must be, can't change it, has to happen. So, in my early upbringing, I used to think that God floated around the sky, looked like Moses, and took score. So, in other words, Michael, you were speeding on your way to work. You cut somebody off, and you weren't nice to the lady at the 7-Eleven. So for you, that's going to be 2 ingrown toenails, 1 flat tire, and a bad real estate deal. Obviously, it doesn't work that way. So here's what an immutable law is, all right? And this is for those that think they're on top of the world and doing great and nothing bad's ever going to happen. First of all, that's an immutable law. The gift of life is in the struggle. We have to have struggles, period. If we didn't have struggles, we'd have no reason to be more patient, kind, or tolerant. We'd have no reason to try to be better people. We'd have no reason to build spiritual muscles. So we'd be like a fruit. When it's ripe, it rots. When it's green, it's growing. So struggles are God's way of forcing us to continue to improve self, to work on self. Secondly, let's go to crisis. Crisis is an immutable law of the universe. And here's what I tell people all the time. Everybody listening to me right now, tell me this is not the case with you. You're either in the middle of a crisis right now, you're coming out of a crisis, or you can bet your butt you're about to go into a crisis. Now, isn't that the way life has been, Michael?
Absolutely. In fact, you mentioned there's four reasons that people enter into crisis. Can you share what those are?
Sure, yeah. And first of all, I want to get everybody to identify with that. I've had crisis my whole life. There's always a struggle. There's always this, and why me? That's an immutable law of the universe. That's meant to be and has to be to build spiritual, business, relationship, and attitude muscles. So here's the reason crisis comes. Crisis will come. By the way, we're in charge of these. We have dominion. That's what dominion means. It's completely different than the definitions you might get in temple or church. Those are what they call just milk meanings. But crisis comes for one or all of these four reasons. You either have a behavior you need to change, a character defect you need to fix, a vice you need to give up, or you're not stepping up to the purpose that you were put on this earth to step up to. Violate any or all of those for any length of time, and crisis will come. Now, the only thing that makes that crisis bigger or smaller is the resistance you give to it. You give resistance and don't make the change, it will crush you. Inevitably, it will crush you. That must be. However, yield to the crisis, make the change, and all of a sudden the crisis diminishes, and that too passes. Now you got to get ready for the next crisis after that. So those are some of the what we call immutable laws, of the universe. Mike, it's like you plant a pumpkin seed. Mother Nature doesn't play a trick on us and give us a thorn bush. Plant a pumpkin seed, you get a pumpkin.
Right.
Now, if you plant the seed too deep or too shallow, or you don't water it enough or fertilize it, you're not going to get a pumpkin. You won't get a thorn bush, but you won't get a pumpkin. So now what we have to do is what? We have to go on the search for the information. So now we have to exercise our brain power and our muscles. Find out how deep to plant it, how much fertilizer, how much water. If we do that, any and every person who does that must get a pumpkin. Would you agree with that?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So now the big piece in the book is how do we find our purpose? What are we here for? And let me just mention this, those of you who are listening, this book is not a religious book, but it doesn't conflict with religion. It's also not a book about making money or success, but it's everything about making money or success. Particularly if you consider yourself, a type A or, one of these real strivers or pushers. This is like a playbook for life. You play in basketball, you could be in the best shape in the world, but if you don't know the rules, a guy in lesser shape is going to beat you. You're going to lose every time. Mm-hmm. Inner Voice is a playbook for life from someone who's got lots of years on earth, has had numbers and numbers and numbers of businesses and relationship issues. Well, not relationship, but has gone through, those problems. So it's a book on wisdom. I'm not necessarily saying I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I've spent over 25,000 hours over the last 6 years, 20 countries, several millions of dollars of my own money to go out looking for these answers and pass them on. So let me also mention this, that if you go to, because you're listening to this show, if you go to innervoicementor.com, which is innervoicementor.com, you simply opt in. You can order the book from Amazon. If you look on Amazon, this book has got spectacular 5-star reviews from all over the world, changing people's lives from all walks of life. And certainly it's changed mine. But if you go there and you order the book, as a bonus tonight for being a listener on the show, you will automatically get 8 free videos. These are 35 to 50-minute videos, which is me talking right directly to you and taking this inner voice message 1,000 feet deeper. So you got about 4 or 5 more hours of training just for getting the book. And we sell those videos for $500, but you're going to get them for free tonight. And then once you're finished reading the book, you also qualify to get 2 free coachings with one of our Inner Voice certified business and life coaches. Those are usually $500 each. So you're going to get $1,500 in real rich content today just for simply ordering and reading. By the way, you got to read the book.
Right. Well, okay. Thanks a lot for that, Russ. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
You have two figures or points of view in the book, with the warrior and the statesman. When you mentioned about people, when they especially achievers, they when they're presented with an issue, they're going to try to charge at it and address it that way.
Right.
That is the warrior, correct?
That's the warrior.
Okay, so does that necessarily mean that that it's always the wrong way to approach things? I mean, how do you know when to be the warrior or when to be the statesman?
Yeah. Well, you really never have to be a warrior. Now, so let me just mention that's a place people pass through. Some people stay stuck there forever. But once one understands the statesperson way of life and they start practicing, in this book, I don't give advice or opinions. And the reason I don't give advice or opinions is all of us have had lots of advice and opinions in our life, and a lot of them haven't been good. So in this book, I talk with experience, strength, and hope. And that is, do I have an experience like yours? If so, here it is. What did I learn on this journey, around the world that helped me to handle things differently than in my warrior years that I never knew of? And then why is my life better? So when people start practicing, you got two choices. You could do it the warrior way, or you could do it the statesperson way. What will happen is you start trying the statesperson because you've never tried that power before, and you start to get evidence that it works better. Then you're going to want to grab another one and another one and another one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Let's see here. Let me give you. First of all, here's what I recognized. What I recognized is that I was powerless over most. If I look back in my career, and I'm honest with myself, I was powerless over most people, places, and things, and most situations. And every time I tried to control or manipulate them, my life became unmanageable. And so I learned at the top levels of a number of religions, I learned this practice of surrender. And if anyone is in any kind of anger, anxiety, frustration, fear, or doubt, we're not supposed to have those emotions. Those are human taught, purely human taught. And so what God says is surrender those things. Give them to me, let me handle them. So let me give you an example. There's a chapter in a book called The Time Clock of Life. And this is about what is the game of life about. Now, all listening, how many of you have ever just stopped it all, took some breath or some time, say, what is life about? What am I doing here? And if you haven't, let me tell you what life is about. It's a game, okay? Life is a game. That's how I like to look at it. Just like basketball is a game. Basketball is the game. The time clock is an hour, and the scoreboard is points to tell you whether you win or lose. How do you know whether you win or lose in life? Well, I used to tally that up by a merger and acquisition, a new car, a new boat, a new this, time off. And you know what? Cancer, a tragedy can come in a moment, which makes all that money and everything you worked for irrelevant. That doesn't mean we shouldn't strive and do those things, but there's some other immutable laws we have to put into place if we want those things that we've earned to stick. So in comparison, here's what the game of life is about. The game of life is a search for the truth. Okay, basketball is basketball, but the game of life is about a search for the truth. That's what you're here to do. And a search for the truth with who? It's about a search for the truth with you and the God of your understanding, or the power of the universe of your understanding. Obviously, this universe didn't come about by accident. Yeah. So the game of life, search for the truth. There's a place in the book we call two-way conscious contact, which was practiced by Harvey Firestone, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, some of the wealthiest people in the early 1900s practiced this, and we explain it in the book. So the game of life, search for the truth. The time clock is today. At the highest levels of religion that I went out and studied, all agree that God did not build us with enough energy for tomorrow, next week, or next year. We only have energy for today. So if you are in anger, anxiety, frustration, fear, or doubt, chances are you're living in tomorrow. You're playing a what-if game. What if this? What if that? What if this doesn't happen? What if I do that? And if we bring it back into today, we don't have anything to worry about. We're listening to this radio show. You're probably in your house. You probably got a computer. You ate a good meal. So the anger, anxiety, frustration, fear, doubt all comes from tomorrow. Generally, they believe also is if we don't have enough energy for tomorrow, next week, next year, God certainly didn't build us with energy for tomorrow. So, or I'm sorry, for yesterday. So if we go into yesterday, here's what we go there for: guilt, shame, and resentment. I could have, I should have, why didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the game of life, search for the truth, which we teach you how to do in the book. The time clock is keeping it in today.
Mm-hmm.
And keeping it in today is really important. And God gives us lots of clues, like, have you ever seen two birds on an electric wire having a nervous breakdown? Because they're living in today. I mean, nature is all full of clues on immutable laws of the universe. All right, so what's the scoreboard? Here's the biggie. The game of life, search for the truth. The time clock, keep it in today. That's how we stay out of anxiety, frustration, fear, doubt, guilt, and shame. And now the scoreboard. Here's mine. My scoreboard these days is, at the end of the day, what is my ratio of being happy, joyful, and spiritually free with the absence of anger, anxiety, frustration, fear, and doubt? Yeah. I put a few of those together. Life starts to get good. Life starts to fall into place. We start to remove the blocks. Think about it. Any of you are struggling relationship-wise, business-wise, don't like the job, kids. Chances are you're all blocked up with anxiety, frustration, fear, doubt. And then add to that a host of character defects: self-centered, finger-pointing, judging, blaming, criticizing, sarcasm, self-pity. So this book teaches us how to get out of that warrior mode, and how to find our purpose and live that with proof that there's a better way to accomplish our goals. Michael, I can tell you, I work 2/3 less than I've ever worked in my life, and I'm 1,000% more productive now.
That's fantastic to hear. Hey, I have one more question for you, and then I'm going to ask you to offer maybe something that people can take as an exercise, just to maybe experience a little bit of what you teach in the book. The question is, a lot of people who are trying to get ahead, they're trying to live a good life. It's the root of it is wanting approval or support, from other people. Why do people chase after it, and how can they get it without having to chase after it like that?
You're saying like approval or support from friends or peers or family,
right?
That
Yeah.
Doing the right thing.
In other words, yeah. Just like you had amassed a fortune, there were may have been things within you that were saying, yeah, I need to do this because I want approval. What that might be one. I'm just thinking out loud, but
that's very big. So let me take this, because we only have so much time on this interview, and we're gonna miss a big and important chunk of this, and that is purpose. But the approval, here's what happened to me at 20 years old. Listen, I grew up in an alcoholic family, abusive parents, very horribly abusive. I got in trouble, and I ended up going to jail at 17 years old, and I spent 3 years in jail back 35 years ago. And my self-esteem, my self-confidence was in the gutter. High school dropout. I got married 3 months after I met my wife. We were married 29 years. And I was working in a slaughterhouse. I was killing hogs for a living, making $6 an hour, like a Rocky movie, And one day I got this voice in my head, i.e. the name of the book, Inner Voice.
Mm-hmm.
And this voice is telling me that you can do something better with your life. You can do something better with your life. And any of you listening, if you've ever had that voice, Napoleon Hill says it best when he says, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. God would never give you the thought if you couldn't carry it out. So if you've got those thoughts that you could do better, get out of the struggle, do better financially, relationship-wise, you can. But you've got to get on the search for the truth, and the Inner Voice book will help you do that. So, Mike, here's what happened. I start sending away for all the get-rich-quick ads that you see in the back of magazines. I'm 20 years old now, and none of it ever worked for me. One day I sent off for a book on real estate investing, $10 book, no magical answers. In 3 weeks, I made $11,000 using a strategy out of that book. Now I'm 20 years old. I took all that money and I used it as a down payment for 2 more run-down, beat-up properties. From there, I learned how to take home improvement loan on them, and then I used some to fix the house and some to buy another property. By the age of 23, I was able to quit my job financially independent. I wasn't rich, but I had enough money coming in off the properties where I didn't have to go to work anymore. I had a couple $1,000 a month coming in off of the properties. Now, 4 more years after that, at age 27, I hit a net worth of $1 million. I made the first $1 million at 27 years old. But let me just back up, because people say, Russ Whitney made a lot of money because he was passionate about real estate. All right, now we're getting back to your question of how do you get support, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm going around in a circle on this, but you'll understand the point when I'm done. So I'm like a cross-eyed discus thrower, not very accurate, but I get the job done. So here's the deal. I wasn't passionate about real estate. I was passionate about being a millionaire. This book said I could be a millionaire, and I believed it. I was 20. And I didn't realize this till years later because I went at real estate with a passion. But it was never about the money for me. I always lived below my means. I needed to be a millionaire to show all those people in my childhood who told me I was nobody and nothing and no good that I was somebody. I thought that being a millionaire would make me somebody. But you know, the interesting part, my business was providing decent, safe, and affordable housing for low-income people. So it was all about helping people. That's what my business was about. Did I make money at it, and a lot of money? Indeed, I did. But God had me in a helping people business. So look for a reason bigger than the pain. Don't look for approval from peers' rents. Lead by example and get it done. I always like to tell people this. I'm not responsible for what people say about me, whether they like what I do or don't like what I do. I'm not responsible if they insult me or slander me. In fact, it's none of my business. My only job is to keep my side of the fence clean with me and the God of my understanding.
That sounds almost like a relief. Sounds a little more simple.
It is. You know, I remember when I got started in real estate, I remember my father-in-law, who was just a blue-collar guy. He didn't mean it. He just didn't know any better. Telling me, oh, my God, you'll buy these properties and the tenants are all going to move out, or the plumbing is going to go, or, you know, the roof is going to go. And I'm thinking, you know what, people have been buying rental properties for 200 years. They've been making money on them for 200 years. Just because I buy one, all the tenants are going to move out? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Luckily, you know, although I didn't have a lot of formal education, I did have some street sense and some common sense. And so I just pushed on, you know what I mean? It was an inner voice driving me. I just knew it was the right thing.
Yeah. Okay, so listen, as we close, Russ, can you offer some sort of exercise from the book that people can take with them and, you know, hopefully have some good benefit from it?
Yeah, I can. This may be a lot for just this little bit of time. Some of these things take a little more explanation, but I'll give you the difference between the warrior and the statesperson's to-do lists. So how about teaching them how to do a to-do list, and they can take this as an exercise and try it.
That sounds good.
If you're listening to me, most of you, if you're in a warrior mode, brothers, you got your legal pad out, and you write things to do, and then whether you do it morning or night, 5 or 6 or 7 things come right up. Boom, 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 just like that. Then here's what happens is the warrior then makes the to-do list a job. In other words, once the thoughts stop, instead of just stopping and being in the moment and getting that done, it's, well, let me call Joe, and I could start this project, and let me go try that. And so now we get 40 or 50 things on the to-do list, which you could never get done in a day. All of the things that you did after the thoughts stopped were all self-will. Those will either never come to pass or were never meant to be, or they're going to go on tomorrow's to-do list because you can't get them done today, and then you put yourself under the pressure of never good enough syndrome. So that's just a total exercise in futility. And listen, I was the master. I'd have 2 or 3 to-do lists with 50 things on them. Now, here's the way we do it in the statesperson. We do it in a journal. In the inner voice, we have these journals, right? Anybody can. What we do is this. We do what's called two-way conscious contact. Now, this was practiced by, I told you, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone, some of the wealthiest men in the beginning of our century. And they did it religiously. And here's what we do. We take our journal out and I write Russ's prayer to God is how I do it. And then I started out with gratitude in the morning. It takes about 5 minutes to do this, 10 minutes. I write gratitude. What am I grateful for? Sometimes I'm just grateful because I have a wonderful bed and I get a good night's sleep, or I'm healthy, or, you know, I live in Florida, so it's a blessing to just live in such good weather. So I write what I'm grateful for that morning, and, you know, like I say, just a couple sentences is enough. Then I go down to what I want. You know, God, I need help with this, I need help with that, you know, can you help me with this business or whatever it is. But here's the most critical part, and this is the one most people miss. We always end it with, God, direct me in my thinking, show me your will, capital your will for me, and give me the power to carry that out. Because we're so busy running on self-will, we never get God's message. Now, I'm going to show you here how to get it absolutely verifiable, you can't doubt it, contact with that divine power, so you know you're getting guidance. All right, so now, when you do your to-do list, by the way, in the Warrior, you also self-hypnotize yourself. All you're going to get is tasks, errands, and work items, because that's all you're asking for. In the two-way conscious contact, we're opening ourselves up to all God's thoughts and direction. So you're going to get people that pop up. You're going to get things that pop up that you know aren't even the way you talk. So here's what happens. Once we write that out, God, direct me in my thinking, show me your will, give me the power to carry it out. Now we sit back, and then thoughts are going to start to come into your head. Now, average human being gets about 60 to 70 thoughts a day. And that's how God talks to a lot of us, primarily is in thoughts. Now, he can send angels in the form of people. We can get it through books, but thoughts is where we get it. So when those thoughts come in, you just write them. You know, number one, boom, number two, number three. You're going to get 6, 7, maybe as much as 9 or 10 things that are going to come to you right away. As soon as the thoughts stop, you put the pen down. You don't judge the thoughts and say, this is unholy, that's holy, this is God, there's no, you just write. Now, at the end of that, we then put that through a test of what we call the 4 absolutes. So we then go back through each item that we just wrote down, and the 4 absolutes are, is that what I just wrote honest? Is it unselfish? Is it pure? And is it loving? If it's honest, unselfish, pure, and loving, that is definitely divine guidance, and you just do it. You just do what it says. You don't even think about it. If it had anything to do with finger-pointing, judging, blaming, vengeance, or any of the other human character defects, then cross them off your list, because they're just going to be a waste of time.
There's no doubt of the wisdom in that. Anybody listening could hear that. Could you repeat that? It was like a brief, the end of the exercise. That really struck me.
Yeah, is God, direct me in my thinking, show me your will, a capital your will for me, and give me the power to carry it out.
Wow.
Now, you know what, as most people, when they write their to-do list, it's all about me, I, what I want. There's no God in that. Now, if you're not asking for it and looking for that answer, you're not going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole chapter in the Inner Voice book on this particular exercise. If we're on a Skype call or something like that, I could show it to you. But I do it religiously. My staff does it religiously. And the other thing we do is this. The two-way doesn't mean two-way between you and God. That's a given. Two-way means Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone. They used to then share their two-way with each other. And that way they get objective input, on the realness of their direct contact.
Kind of like the mastermind,
we do that in Inner
right?
Voice, so you can use your coach for that. If you go to innervoicementor.com and order the book, you're going to automatically get those $500 free, videos free, and you'll get 2 free coaching calls. So you can start the process with one of the coaches, and those coachings are good 45 to 55 minutes. So they're really, really content rich, and hopefully, if you've listened to this whole interview, you're realizing that this is really a different message than what you'll hear out on the Fake It Till You Make It seminars. This isn't about faking it. This is about really making change from the inside out and finding the power in that change.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Russ Whitney, a person who's been on both sides, and I tend to think he's on the wisdom side right now. So head over to innervoicementor.com. I think that's
go to Inner Voice Mentor. Just opt in. You'll take you to Amazon to order the book, and you'll automatically, when you opt in, you'll get your first video within probably 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then the rest of them 8 videos will come over the next 15 days.
Great.
And they're really, really good. I mean, the comments we're getting back are just spectacular. So if you like, I'm sorry. See there's my ringtone.
That's our cue. Okay, Russ. Well, listen. Thanks for joining us today. A lot of good things to chew on there for people. Super. And hopefully people go out and check out the book. That's a good thing. It's that's the help the world part. And I think that if you live from that place,
it's a game changer for sure.
Exactly. Okay. Well, great. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me, Mike. I really enjoyed the interview.